Hi. Welcome to the fourth section of Echoes of the Enlightenment, Baroque Literature, where a study with John Locke is our fourth literary figure of the age. Come along with us.
Fourth literary figure. A study with John Locke. August 29, 1632 to October 28, 1704. An English philosopher and physician, John Locke was born almost 3 months prior to Baruch de Spinoza, but as Spinoza had a Jewish upbringing, Locke's was Puritan. Born in a cottage by Wrington, Summerset's church, he was baptized the same day, where soon his mother Agnes and father John would move to Pensford, 7 miles outside of Bristol, southwardly. His father, an attorney, and captain for parliamentary forces cavalry of the English Civil War, would leave for war, when Locke the younger was but 10 years old. Most assuredly, we fight for our fathers' causes sooner or later, as biology more often than not trumps political position, when the benefit of doubt is given. I was disappointed in my big brother and punished him by taking away his benefit of doubt until he apologized, as I never knew he could make me consider he wasn't acting in my best interest. My mother would ask us, if everyone was jumping off a cliff, would you too? The Enlightenment, thrust by the unavoidable acceleration of technology, the then modern workers need to follow written instructions as industry grew, and the insatiable desire of man to champion the catacombs of his mind, was the new battlefield. There were many, if not most, but never all, who following optics choose to physically manipulate the world to their liking in the present. Demanding justice now, survival of the fittest kicks in, and amongst a league of fit men, it is better when life and death are on the line. However, there's no losing in Baroque literature. John Locke's upbringing and education made him an exceptional thinker through Baroque literature of the Age of Enlightenment.
Locke was brought up of rural surroundings in a Tudor home in the village of Wrington in Summerset, and although many remain local, timing wouldn't allow Locke to be so. Surely, a young strapping lad like John at the age of 16 was ready, fit, and able for war, as 5 years into the English Civil War was well enough time to decide which side one preferred. If it hadn't been for Locke Sr., whose commander and also member of Parliament sponsored the junior for enrollment at Westminster School in 1647, his valuable insight may have been lost on a battlefield somewhere without having ever been presented. Westminster in London is but a half a mile away from where Charles I's limited representative government proved incapable of protecting His Majesty's freedoms and most basic right of life. The young Locke, only 16 at the time, was certainly in the proximity, but the boys of Westminster were not allowed to attend. Completing studies at Westminster, he matriculated to Christ Church, Oxford at 20 years old. Though with an aptitude for the classics taught at the university, Locke was more interested in the modern Baroque literature of the time, which hasn't until now been defined or the term coined as such. The ability to communicate in the present movement is what Locke, perhaps, learned best at Christ Church, but directed towards medicine through a friend from Westminster, he was also to the Royal Society and experimental philosophy of the times. Receiving his bachelor's in 1656, master's in 1658, and in 1675 a Bachelor of Medicine, Locke had his foundation from which association with the Royal Society provided an amicable audience.
John Locke's upbringing and education made him an exceptional thinker of his time as a staunch proponent of liberalism. One of the most interesting thinkers of the Enlightenment, John Locke is known as the father of liberalist theory, as one of the first British empiricists after Francis Bacon. A study of social contract theory is incomplete without his position, as his views on classic republicanism spewed with liberal theory reflects in our Declaration of Independence. An English philosopher and physician, Locke enlightened Scottish thought, encouraged those French like Voltaire, and cast the American colonies into revolution, if not solely, certainly, partially. Our current concepts of self, existence, and identity are often referenced from the theory of mind presented by Locke, with man being defined by his continued consciousness. With limited representative governments unable to protect those under its auspices, Locke's political legal principles still have influence in theory and practice today.
Empiricism would yield an influx of raw materials to those more than mere kings, and with more raw materials architects took the liberty to express themselves, as Locke would literally. With imports material there is also some type of cultural exchange, if only one of names as John and Johann, or Christopher and Christopher, then implied distance, but in America today not so much. Locke's upbringing and education producing an exceptional thinker wouldn't be so, if he hadn't been able to communicate his position effectively, as philosophy is not only thought, but in writing as well. From touring France as a tutor since 1675, in 1679 Locke would return to England to compose his 2 treatises of government against absolute monarchies, drawing from experience under Charles I. There he also grounds political legitimacy on individual consent. Fleeing to Holland in 1683 for 5 years, he had time to return to his writing as he worked on his essay and delivered his letter of toleration. Accompanying Mary II back to England in 1689 after the Glorious Revolution of 1688, Locke would publish the bulk of his work. An essay concerning human understanding was completed and published by Locke in 1689, with his 2 treatises of government, and a letter concerning toleration came subsequently behind the same year. Moving to Essex in 1691, Locke would remain until his death in 1704 in the household of Sir Francis Masham, at the invitation of Lady Masham. Obviously, heavily influenced by the Whig political movement, Locke remains by Whig legacy an intellectual hero, arguably of the better.
Through Baroque literature in the Age of Enlightenment, a window is opened by John Locke, whose upbringing and education produced one of the greatest thinkers of the time. Though he was without a family of his own to continue his biological legacy on Earth, he lives on in his Baroque literature published yesterday. Proving philosophy spans time, Locke has done so as this report is completed.
That is all the information we have for this session. If there are any questions, office hours are posted. Next session we cover Gottfried W. Leibniz and his contributions to Baroque literature of the Enlightenment. See you then. Thank you for your time and consideration.